When people talk about health, they often think in terms of symptoms: what hurts, what's tired, what's failing. But that's already far too late in the story. Real health decisions are being made at a much deeper level, long before pain or diagnosis enters the picture. They're being made at the cellular level, where the body is constantly negotiating between damage and repair. And this is where pomegranate juice becomes genuinely interesting, because it doesn't promise quick fixes or surface-level stimulation. It works where responsibility actually lives, in the quiet, unseen processes that determine whether the body slowly deteriorates or steadily renews itself. Every day, your cells are exposed to oxidative stress. That's not a dramatic concept, but it's a consequential one. Oxidative stress is what happens when the body is overwhelmed by free radicals. Unstable molecules produced by stress, poor diet, pollution, and even normal metabolism. Left unchecked, they damage cell membranes, DNA, and mitochondria. Over time, this damage accumulates, and the body becomes less resilient, less adaptive, more fragile. Pomegranate juice contains powerful polyphenol, particularly punicalagins, which act as a kind of internal defense system. They don't eliminate stress, nothing worthwhile does, but they help the body respond to it intelligently. And that distinction matters. A healthy system isn't one that avoids challenge, it's one that can repair itself after challenge. When oxidative stress is controlled, cells can redirect energy away from constant emergency response and toward maintenance, regeneration, and immune function. That's why people often experience subtle but meaningful changes: improved energy, clearer thinking, better recovery. Not because something magical happened, but because the body stopped fighting fires and started rebuilding structure. There's also a psychological parallel here that's worth paying attention to. When you consistently give your body what it needs at a foundational level, you reinforce a deeper principle, that long-term stability is built through disciplined, almost invisible choices. You're signaling to yourself that your future matters, that you're not merely reacting to the present moment but investing in what comes next. That orientation toward repair instead of chaos is the same principle that underlies resilience in both biology and character. So the real question isn't whether pomegranate juice is healthy. The question is whether you're willing to support the systems that quietly sustain you, before they begin to fail. If the first question of health is what happens inside your cells, the second is how effectively the entire system communicates with itself. And that communication depends, in a very literal sense, on blood flow. Circulation isn't glamorous, but it's foundational. It's the mechanism through which oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and information are delivered. When circulation is compromised, nothing works quite the way it should. Energy drops. Focus fades. Recovery slows. And often, people accept this gradual decline as normal aging, when in reality it's a breakdown in the body's ability to move life where it's needed. Pomegranate juice enters this conversation not as a stimulant, but as a structural support. Its bioactive compounds have been shown to support endothelial function, the health of the inner lining of blood vessels. That lining determines whether vessels remain flexible and responsive or stiff and resistant. When blood vessels lose their ability to adapt, pressure increases, flow becomes inefficient, and the heart is forced to work harder than it should. Over time, that inefficiency expresses itself as fatigue, reduced stamina, and cognitive dullness. When circulation improves, the opposite occurs: oxygen delivery becomes efficient, waste removal accelerates, and tissues regain the conditions they need to function optimally. There's a reason improved blood flow is often associated with clearer thinking and better mood. The brain is extraordinarily sensitive to circulation. Even minor improvements in oxygen and nutrient delivery can sharpen attention and stabilize emotional regulation. When the system is supported, the mind becomes less reactive and more deliberate. And that's not just physiology, it's philosophy embodied in flesh. A well-regulated system behaves predictably. A compromised one becomes chaotic. This idea extends beyond the body. When blood flows properly, the system doesn't panic. It adapts. It distributes resources where they're most needed. That's precisely how resilient individuals and healthy societies function as well. They don't hoard energy or operate in crisis mode. They circulate resources intelligently. Supporting circulation, then, is not just about heart health, it's about restoring order to a system that's been living under unnecessary strain. So when you choose something as simple as pomegranate juice, you're not chasing a temporary boost. You're reinforcing the pathways that sustain clarity, endurance, and composure. And when flow is restored, life, quite literally, moves forward. If the first layer of health is cellular integrity and the second is circulation, then the third is something both more subtle and more demanding: time. Because longevity isn't built by what you do once, it's built by what you repeat. And pomegranate juice, taken seriously, becomes less of a drink and more of a daily agreement you make with your future self. Its compounds have been associated with hormonal balance, metabolic stability, and protection against cognitive decline, but those benefits don't exist in isolation. They only emerge through consistency. And consistency is a psychological act before it is a biological one. Hormones regulate motivation, mood, energy, and recovery. When they're unstable, discipline feels impossible. Everything requires effort. Pomegranate juice supports systems involved in reducing chronic inflammation and oxidative stress, both of which quietly disrupt hormonal signaling over time. When those signals become clearer, the body stops operating in survival mode and starts functioning with intent. Metabolism becomes more efficient. Energy becomes more reliable. And with that reliability comes something profoundly important: trust in your own capacity to act. There's a deeper pattern here that's easy to miss. Small, repeated behaviors shape identity. When you choose something that supports long-term health rather than immediate gratification, you reinforce a narrative about who you are. You become someone who plans, someone who prepares, someone who understands that the future is not an abstraction but a consequence. That psychological shift is inseparable from physical longevity. People who live well into old age often share one trait above all others. They take responsibility for the maintenance of their lives before crisis forces their hand. Cognitive decline and physical deterioration don't usually arrive as sudden catastrophes. They arrive as neglect, accumulated quietly over years. The antidote isn't obsession or perfection, it's alignment. When your daily habits reflect your values, effort decreases and meaning increases. A simple ritual like drinking pomegranate juice becomes a stabilizing signal, a reminder that your health is not something you react to, but something you cultivate.